Good morning and welcome back to the One Celtic Fans View in the Celtic news this morning. Chris Sutton had a little bit of a dig at Scottish football, as did Ian Crocker, allegedly on I never watched the game, I'm just reading the comments about it this morning. They spoke about the fact that there was 4,000 Hearts fans at the away end in Edinburgh last night. Now you remember, they were saying it's a pity it's not like this everywhere. And it is a shame that the away fans aren't there. And as we're talking about this, because obviously there's no away fans at the game this weekend, and I'll talk about that in a second. But these commentators have to remember that Hearts have also reduced the allocation. Hearts and Hibs have got a little special relationship to make sure that it keeps the atmosphere at these games. But Hearts have reduced their allocation. Hibs haven't reduced their allocation to Celtic. So rather than point out the sort of disparity between that derby and the derby that's coming up this weekend, I think they need to look at the bigger picture in Scottish football. And I think Scottish football is sort of a spiral into not being TV friendly as a spectator sport. But anyway, I did ask fans whether they thought going back to the full 7,500 seats would be a good idea. I did ask that 7 days ago, and I said, let me test the water, as they say. Should Celtic and them go back to 7,500 seats for away fans? And the way it had been from basically the time of, before, it used to be even bigger. Some people were saying that we had more fans than that. We actually had a bigger allocation at Ibrox back in the day. Anyway, 78%. There was over 1,100 votes. So I did wait till I get to around about 1,000 before I decided to commentate it. So that was a good little sample. 78% said yes, 22% said no. And a lot of those were probably Rangers fans. So yeah, because there was there was a few commentators on it, but not a lot. So tell me what you think about that in the comments. Should Celtic and Rangers go back to the bigger allocation? It does make for a better atmosphere. Chris Sutton believes it makes a bigger atmosphere, as does Ian Crocker, but he's right up the back end of the team across the city. So who cares what he says? Anyway, let's move on. I want to talk about Lewis Palmer and said Haksabanovic. Were Celtic right to let said Haksabanovic go in the summer because they knew they had Lewis Palmer? And let's face it, I think Lewis Palmer is a better player than said Haksabanovic. Tell me what you think in the comments. Obviously, when you look at the stats, Haksabanovic is a player that it didn't make as a good an impact. It was decent, but it wasn't as effective as a lot as I had hoped, or as he had maybe mouthed off to be. The Honduran, on the other hand, after his 3.5 move to Celtic, in just 20 games, has scored a good few amount of goals for Celtic, 2 in the Champions League, and he's created 9 assists this season. So on paper, Celtic have done the right thing by letting said Haksabanovic go. Will you bring back said Haksabanovic, or will he be sold to Stoke? When you look at it, when you look at the 42 appearances that both players have made in total, Haksabanovic had 42 games and he scored just 5 goals and he created 4 assists. He didn't have a great time at Celtic, and that's probably the reason he wasn't getting into the team. But when you look at Palmer's played just a little bit under the same amount of minutes as what the Haksabanovic played, and he's certainly, for me, he's better value for money. So will Lewis Palmer going to be the big star that he wants to be and playing Spanish football? I think he needs to change his game a little bit. He is a fantastic player. He will go on to be fantastic for Celtic, and he's going to be a lot better than what Haksabanovic would be anyway. Anyway, John Hartson's been talking about Celtic and the fact that we need to get in a goal scorer, because the breaking news last night obviously was the fact that Yang and O have been confirmed. Yang and O have been confirmed that they're off to the Asia Cup. They will leave Celtic for the competition that starts on the 10th of January. It's after the season sort of finishes for its half-term break, if you like, the winter shutdown. That's only 2 weeks. It never snows during the 2 weeks, and it's probably the best weather that we get. The crappier weather comes anyway, but it's whether the shutdown in Scotland is actually worth it. Being a couple of week period is a question for the powers to be at Scottish football. I mean, is it really worth it, that 2 week shutdown in January, when, let's face it, the weather's never that bad? Although people will say, well, you look at the weather last night, there was a couple of games called off. That snow will be gone in a couple of days. So it's Scotland after all. Anyway, the fact that Owen Yang are away to the Asia Cup. They're the second ones. Obviously, the Australian Marco has been called up already. Owen Yang have now been called up for their country for the Asia Cup. So Celtic definitely need to go out and get a striker. John Hartson has said Celtic could end up with Kevin Van Veen as a striker. Surely not John Hartson. What are you even thinking of? What we do know is the fact that Celtic are looking to bring in a striker, a central midfield player, and a left winger, and maybe even a left back during the next transfer window. It is seen as a bit of a priority that we get someone in quick. And not only for the end of the season, I think we need to be looking at bringing in a striker that will be able to play in the Champions League and take us to that next level in the Champions League. Although Kyogo has scored in the Champions League, we do need a striker that can bully themselves about. Will O grow into be that player? Well, you never know. You never know. There has been some speculation last night about the new Celtic top and for next season. Now, these pictures kind of come out about the same time every year. Now, when you look at the amount of tops that Celtic have released this season alone, I want to go back to the old days where you come out with one strip a season, you got a home strip one season, and then you got an away strip released the next season. But the money men at Celtic these days, and let's not even talk about this 70 odd million to 100 million that's currently sitting in the Celtic coffers. There has been a leak of the new Celtic top. Tell me what you think about it. I think it's probably worse than the one that we brought out this year. And let's face it, most Celtic fans, their bodies aren't going to look like that. So does it look good for you? I don't know. I'm not too sure about it. I wish Adidas would stop trying to muck about with the hoops and just keep it as it is. You know, it's one of those things. But it's another Celtic top that will get released next year. Is this the Celtic top that will be released? Who knows? Anyway, we move on to Harry Kewell. Harry Kewell was obviously he wasn't at the game at the weekend. If you spotted that on the TV, you've done pretty well. He wasn't on the bench. He was given time off by Celtic as he looks to take over Yokohama F. Marinos. Yes, he's going to where Ange Postecoglou came from, and Kevin Muscat has just left. The Australian is set to depart Celtic, and who will Celtic bring in? Who will Celtic bring in as a replacement coach? Will Celtic bring in anyone as a replacement coach? Will Brendan Rodgers look to a player that he looked, a coach, player, he was a player, but he then became a coach. Will he look to Kolo Toure? Remember him? He was obviously with Brendan his first time around at Celtic, and he went to Leicester with Brendan. Will he come back to Celtic? Scott Brown has been mentioned, but Scott Brown, I think he wants to do his own thing, so I don't think that he would. I mean, would Scott Brown benefit from coming back to Celtic and being under the wing of Brendan Rodgers? Scott Brown has come out and said that he doesn't see that happening, that he wants to do his own thing. I'm under the impression that, I think that Scott Brown would learn more as a manager. He will have learned more from his time at Fleetwood Town and the mistakes that he made and, the decisions that he made. He's had time to reflect on that. You don't get that when you're working under another manager. You don't get that insight into the game as much. You learn from your mistakes. All good managers learn at a lower level and then work their way up through the game. So I think Scott Brown would be a no for coming in. What about Darren O'Dea? Will Darren O'Dea get promoted from the B team? Since arriving back at Celtic in a coaching capacity, he's taking the youth team to a UEFA League games. He has lots of experience. And let's face it, Darren O'Dea smashed the hands. So would he come in? Would he be a good person to bring in? I'm not one for bringing in a lot of ex-players into the coaching staff because sometimes it just doesn't work out. Although, when you look at it, the first team really needs a lot of people that know what it's like to play for Celtic. I think Brendan's lost a little bit of a motivation. What about Charlie Mulgrew? Will Charlie Mulgrew come back into management in any capacity? He has been on the TV quite a bit like Scott Brown. He has dabbled in coaching before, but he's currently not doing a lot, is he? Darren O'Dea, he's with the Celtic B team. Charlie Mulgrew, he is a Celtic legend. I've got a signed scarf with him up there. It's up there. It was signed by the one and only Charlie Mulgrew. Anyway, tell me what you think about that in the comments. Will Celtic bring anyone in at all? Now, there's been a lot of speculation about the one and only Matt O'Reilly. I was looking at some information about Matt O'Reilly this morning, and it looks like the hammersway.com have surprisingly come out with a thing that they reckon that they're going to get Matt O'Reilly in the summer transfer window. It's unlikely that he'll join in the January transfer window halfway through the season, but our very own employee, it says, at the West Ham Way, says that the West Ham are big fans of the Danish international Matt O'Reilly. The midfielder was an excellent last season for Celtic, and they reckon that the Hammers are going to come in for him in the summer. It said, if anything, this comes down to their financial position. It's understandable the reigning Scottish champions are desperate to keep a hold of the 23-year-old, it says, and as they look to win the SPFL. Yet again, the fact that Brendan Rodgers is unlikely to accept any offer for him until the summer, which works perfectly for the Hammers, this article goes on to say. There's no secret that West Ham have areas to add to, and goes on to say, but given their limited budget in January, it's been suggested that they're going to come in from it in the summer. It could be an interesting summer. I don't think that he will go in this summer. I think he's got unfinished business in the Champions League. But if a bid was to come in, Brendan Rodgers would be right up against it with the one and only Lawwell conglomerate that's at Celtic. I think that they would like to see the money come in, even if we win the league. And we don't have to sell any of our top players next summer if we win the league this season. We're going to get 60 million from the Champions League, which will boost the coffers to the already bulging 72 million that's in the bank. But, when Lawwell and Cole comes to it, they see 25 million for a player, they're going to grab it. And I think that could be to the detriment of the Celtic side. That is in the future. That's for future videos. Tell me what you think about the video today. Tell me what you think about Big Chris Sutton saying that he wishes it was like that everywhere. And the fact that I did do that poll where 78% of the 1,000 people that did vote, over 1,100 people did vote, should Celtic and Rangers, the Rangers, go back to 7,500 seats for away fans, the way that it's been for absolutely time of the day. I do know a lot of Celtic fans that even if it did, they've suggested that they would never go back to Ibrox after what they did. And remember, they did change the ticket allocation because they couldn't handle us winning. Anything else is just a lie.